And so we're having a hard time today replacing some of these people. At least up here in Canada, you're keeping your skilled trades classes. You're keeping your hands-on classes. Some of our states have made the mistake of taking a lot of these classes out. It's the dumbest thing we could ever do, because these are good jobs that will not get replaced by artificial intelligence. I've been watching AI stuff really closely. Don't bother studying radiology. You're going to get replaced. Now, I noticed a very odd thing happen when the meat industry switched from hand grafting to computers. This was during the 90s. And I started getting drawings from every major company with weird mistakes on them. And they were perceptual errors. And the people that drew those drawings, they would have had a community college course for drawing, but they never built anything, and they never drawn by hand. So they were making mistakes like the center of the circle is not the center of the circle. They simply weren't seeing it. And then when I went out and I talked to people at Pixar, they sometimes have to drag them off the computers and get them back on the hand board, and they were still doing storyboards in paper on the hall walls. You've got to touch to perceive. You know, until virtual reality gets more perfected, that hasn't changed yet. Okay, we got to keep these clusters that foster creativity. Art, sewing, woodworking, welding, theater. Theater's not going to get replaced by AI. Farming's not going to get replaced with AI. I know one job I'd like to automate in these big dairies is milking. That's just drudgery. Now what that would do is free up the people to do real stockmanship and observe their cows. I want to emphasize the importance of stockmanship. When I was young, one mistake I made is I thought I could build a perfect system to replace management. People want the thing more than they want the management. Both are important. You know, milking's turned into drudgery, but that doesn't mean that the person can just sit and watch TV. He's got to be out there looking at his cows and observing them and doing the stockmanship side of it. When I was a lousy student, I got bullied, and the only places I was not bullied was where there was a shared interest, like horses, electronics, or model rockets. You know how I really made a hit with the students? I made a rocket that looked like our principal. That made me a hit with the students. It was a Mr. Payton rocket. Now, in my final year at the boarding school, I finally started to knuckle down to study when my science teacher came on the scene. And he gave me interesting projects to do. If you saw the HBO movie, I worked on that optical illusion run. And it was difficult to do. It made me happy to find out the stagehands at HBO had a difficult time with it. I've got a new book coming out this spring called Calling All Minds, about the inventors, is to get kids making things. The illustrator had a horrible time with the drawings for the optical illusion room. They had to do them over 2 or 3 times. It wasn't that easy a thing to do. See, the thing is, now studying was a path to a goal. That's how we deal with the motivation issue. Let's say you've got a kid and he loves trains. Let's teach reading with trains, math with trains, but broaden it out. My ability in art was always encouraged. And that showed up around 3rd grade. But all I wanted to do was draw horse heads. You've got to broaden it. Let's draw a saddle, a stable, someplace they might ride the horse to. And a lot of kids like transportation, so where does the airplane go? You can study that. Like you see, that still makes a tie-in back to that train or that airplane. Now what I'm saying is a lot of grandparents are coming up to me because the grandkids get diagnosed and granddaddy finds out he's on the spectrum. And granddaddy's a NASA space scientist, or he's a computer person, or an accountant, or an artist. And a lot of these people had successful careers. Because back in the 50s and 60s, manners were taught in a more structured way. Just recently I was talking to a lady in the airport, and her daughter's got autism, and she says, well, she doesn't have any social skills. I said, you have to teach them to her, and you have to teach them like she's in a foreign country. This is how you shake hands. This is how much pressure. You can only tell the same story about well, I sometimes like to talk about vomit aircraft. I've been on some, and I have to make sure I don't do too many stories about throwing up on planes. Not me, it's other people that do it. Okay, All right. Now, see, the thing about autism is a little bit of autism gives you an artist, a computer scientist. A brain can be more thinking, or a brain can be more social emotional. Now, within a certain narrow range, it's just part of normal variability. You get too much of the trait, then you're going to get no speech or some other severe problem, or epilepsy on top of it. People with bipolar, you have too much emotion, but their relatives have more creative careers, and people with autism, we got more people in technical careers. So the mild forms are normal variation. I think a lot of the increase in autism is increased detection, especially a little kid like you right there. Yes, little SpaceXer. And that would be a reasonable goal for you. There is also Amazon's Blue Origin rocket. I looked up Blue Origin jobs. They were hiring. I did this in September, right after I got back from Cape Kennedy. Yeah, you know, to look around on the internet. Another way to get into good jobs is just chance contacts. So you go up to that person that's wearing that ID badge for some fancy company and you just introduce yourself to them. There's a scene in the HBO movie where I went up to the editor and I got his card. That's how I started in the Farmer Ranchman, because I figured out that certain people can open the door and get you in the back door. Okay, now I want to ask you, what would happen to some top innovators today? Many of them had unconventional educational paths. If they were born today, would they be less successful? Jane Goodall did her famous work with a 2-year secretarial degree. That's all she had. That's all her family could afford. But she wanted to go to Africa, and she became Dr. Leakey's secretary. And then it went way beyond that. How about Thomas Edison? Hyperactive, addled high school dropout. He probably had autism. He memorized every street in his city. Now today, I read on the plane a beautiful article about Stephen Hawking. You know, when he got the Lou Gehrig's disease when he was in graduate school. Pure thought. Well, he couldn't move hardly. Pure thought. I'll be talking later on about the different kinds of minds. He's the pure pattern mathematical mind. It's a beautiful article. I've got to get it out of the pocket of my vest before I put it in the laundry accidentally, because I want to keep that article. Now you see here how I'm a visual associative thinker. The washing machine is not a place I want that article to go. But in the little jammed-in airplane, I couldn't get it into my bag. Okay, Steven Spielberg, dyslexic, lousy student, rejected from a top film school. You know what saved him? His Super 8 movie camera. You see, this brings up a really important thing. Students get interested in careers they get exposed to. I got exposed to beef cattle when I was 15. I was an Easterner originally. I had a student, Lily Calloway Edwards. She's now a professor at Colorado State. She was a primate scientist. She got exposed to cattle in graduate school and she found out she really liked them. See, that gets back to exposure. How about Elon Musk? Super interesting book. It's in paperback now in the airport. I'll let you read this, you can make your own decisions, but he was really nerdy. He also was severely bullied in high school. And there's his dragon spaceship, and its real name is Puff the Magic Dragon. You know, this is the guy I really like, Hitchhiker's Ride to the Galaxy. And here I am at Houston. Yes, the disability section, diversity section wants me to come. I've done all the NASA's. Houston, Ames, Jet Propulsion Lab, Kennedy. Really, really geekisoid. But you know what? There's lots and lots and lots of Asperger's there. Lots of dyslexia. Now this makes me bring up another important thing. What would you rather be? Okay, went down to Kennedy. Would you rather be where autism becomes a primary thing of your identity, or what you do? I ran into a guy who had Tourette's, and I went to visit the Mars launch platform that they're building. Well, a guy with Tourette's is building it. So what would you rather be? As I walked into the Mars launch platform, Mr. Tourette's or Mr. Mars launch platform? Autism is an important part of who I am, but career comes first. I think cattle are more interesting than autism anyway. And I'm seeing too much where kids come up to me and they say, well, I have autism like you. Why don't you tell me about your telescope? Or the 4-H calf you reared? Or some other thing like that. Or you're holding a job and keeping it. And there's the space station mock-up. And then, of course, last night we were stuck out on the tarmac because, I don't know, the Toronto airport is, I don't know. Plane was an hour late due to weather. I don't blame anybody for that. We get into the Toronto airport last night at 11 and we waited 45 minutes for gate. Like, what is wrong with you at the Toronto airport? And there was nothing wrong with the weather. I travel all the time, and that's ridiculous. I was really tired. I got to bed at 12:30 last night, and then I had a 9 o'clock flight this morning to come up here. I was not happy about that. Okay, what are some of the common denominators of some of these unique minds? Growing up with lots of books and knowledge. Yes, and we need to control the video games. These kids that are becoming video game addicts, playing them for 5 hours, 6 hours a day, they're not going anywhere. Now, I don't suggest total banning, but it needs to be limited. Early exposure to career interests, hands-on projects, learning how to work. That needs to start little kids with chores, and then volunteer jobs, walking dogs for the neighbors, maybe feeding calves, church volunteer jobs, things like that, and then a real job that instantly legal. Not over-specialized. Mentors, really important. And we recommend that all students take career-relevant internships. Like our department of animal science, we have like 50 different internships. You need to do a different one each summer. Find out what you like, what you don't like. Now, a Nobel Prize winner is 50% more likely to have an arts and craft hobby than just any other scientist. See, that shows what doing different things can do for you. You know, there were painters, musicians, dancers. This is actual scientific study. This is scientific data there. That's the paper right there, 2008 paper. Okay, what would happen to little Stevie Jobs today? Bullied in school? He learned calligraphy. He's probably on the spectrum. How about little Albert? No speech in the age 3, but he played the violin. What would happen to him today? Makes me cringe. Lining up blocks all the time. I wrote about Albert in my book, Thinking in Pictures, which is over there on the book table. Okay, I'm seeing too many kids labeled autistic, dyslexic, ADHD, or Asperger's, and I'm worried about them getting screened out. And I just got back from Bonneville. You know, I got a lot of oil rigs there. There's a guy undiagnosed on the spectrum, and he is the grabber. What's the grabber do? Well, when you drop the pipe down the well, you drop other stuff you're not supposed to drop down the well, and your rig's totally messed up, you call the grabber. And he comes and he fixes your rig. And he's probably on the spectrum. You see, that's something specialized, niche, highly skilled thing, and he's doing it. I'd rather have him doing that than playing video games in the basement. Because the reason why I'm so negative about the video games is they're not getting jobs in the video game industry. I'm not seeing that happening. You know, they're collecting a welfare check in the basement. What I'm saying with kids labeled like, okay, like you, I want a little SpaceX right here. That's where I want you going. I don't want you going to the basement. Because I'm basically seeing, or the bedroom, whatever, two trajectories, the ones that learn how to work, and the ones that are, you know, holed up in their room, recluses. You gotta stretch these kids. No surprises. Good idea not to have surprises. We gotta stretch and give choices. Say, well, you could do this activity, or you could do some other hockey, or you could do some other activity. Give them choices. You know, there's a lot of dyslexics running major businesses. JetBlue, yeah, that's a good airline. It's the only airline where in the back of the plane you actually have full leg room. And so that you don't get your knees crammed into your chest when the next person in front of you puts the seat back. Somebody with ADHD made that airline. How about the guy, the head of IKEA? He had ADHD and dyslexia. See, some of these people can really have vision. Gary Cohn, Chief Operating Officer of Goldman Sachs. Dyslexic student. Rotten student. And you know how he got his first job? He puts on a nice suit, he goes down to the stock exchange, and he waits until some big important looking guy gets a cab to the airport. Then he goes up, can I share a cab to the airport with you? He said, he didn't want to go to the airport. What he wants to do is talk the guy into a job he didn't even know how to do. That's what he did. Okay, how about Tina? She knows what to do with a political science degree. She was project manager for our new chemistry building. She started out answering phones for a construction company. Then she started working on the finances and job bidding. And she worked on, she ran the whole project on the new building. You see, that's an unconventional career path. You know, these kids that are different, we gotta start looking at all these back doors that we can find. And they're right there, but most people aren't seeing them. You know, there's a lot of creative people. They did not do things the conventional route, and they also didn't over-specialize. All right, this is one of my most important slides, the different kinds of minds. I am a photorealistic visual thinker. Couldn't do algebra. I am concerned some of the algebra requirements that we have in some of our states are screening out these kids. Like a kid who became the grabber for the oil industry. We need our visual thinkers who see in pictures to prevent messes like Fukushima. Colossal visual thinking mistake. And then you have the pattern thinker, the spatial visualizer. That's Stephen Hawking. Total pattern thinker. His first great breakthrough in physics was all done in his head because he couldn't write. Because the equipment for communication was so primitive back then. All in his head. Now it was a 2-page spread. I bought one. It was the other Canadian newspaper. I left a 4-newspaper mess on the plane, except for that one article. I'm going to want to follow up on that because I didn't realize what he had done just in his head. Pure mathematics, pure pattern thinking. Think origami, think organic chemistry. Some of these kids are poor in reading. These skills will often show up around 7, 8 years old. Build on a thing the kid's good at. And then in my book, The Autistic Brain, which we have plenty left of that, I give you the evidence base that what I'm telling you is not a bunch of nonsense. There really are these different kinds of minds. Then you got the verbal facts guy. Knows all the facts about his favorite thing, whether it's movie stars, hockey, whatever it is, cars. I know 3 different kids with autism, teenagers with autism that loved cars, walked into car dealerships when they're like 14 years old and just started selling cars. Yep, you see, that's specialized retail. That's something they can be good at. And then some dyslexics are an auditory thinker. See, one of the things that working in construction has done to me is all about outcomes. I want a kid in a good career. If I have to get him in the back door, fine. Okay, there's a value to the humanities. They give you different ways of thinking. When I was in college, I took a world literature course that I thought I'd hate. Ended up being one of my favorite classes because the professor explained emotionally what the author was trying to get across. This was an old traditional humanities class where we read original texts of a lot of famous writings, no politics in it. He just tried to explain what the author was trying to communicate. Okay, Thomas Edison just said, I'm not a mathematician. I can always hire some, but they can't hire me. That's pure visual thinking. There's my book, The Autistic Brain. Is it evidence-based? Now, I had an interesting trip into Ontario, a First Nation community, and I had dinner with the family with a 10th grader girl. I couldn't believe what her Catholic school had for courses. All kinds of skilled trades, all kinds of theater and arts and things like that. It was like a community college. And I thought that was really wonderful, because waiting until the kid is community college age is too late. We need to expose him to welding when he's 14 years old, find out whether he likes it or hates it. And we need to be exposing them to these different things earlier. I'm worried our education system is screening out visual thinkers. We have draconian algebra requirements. So how did I manage to get through college without algebra? Well, in 66 and 67, it was not the required class. Because the educational fad at the time was probability and statistics. And that's what I took. Well, let's look at why Fukushima melted down. I can't design a nuclear reactor. We got to leave that to the mathematical minds. But all I need to know about a nuclear power plant is that the emergency cooling pump doesn't run when they need it. You know what happens. It's not a really good idea to take a pump with an electrically driven motor and put it in a non-waterproof basement when you're by the sea. That's what happened. That is what happened. Simple watertight doors would not have happened. And then a sump pump, because they're going to leak some, so you better have a sump pump in there too. That's the kind of stuff. Then when I was out working in construction, then we were installing that kind of stuff all the time in meat packing plants. Oh, I just couldn't believe it. We need visual thinkers in science. And one of the reasons we need them is because there's a lot of biomedical research where they can't replicate the results. And it has to do with slight changes in the methods, like how hard you stir or shake samples in a cancer study, totally changing the results. So when I review journal articles, man, it's the methods I go over. And I go, wait a minute, you may have told me all the stuff about your statistics, all the stuff about your lab tests, but you didn't tell me what breed of pig you were using in your study. And that could totally change it. There's different ways you can teach math. People get too hung up on just the latest educational fad. Education is very top-down. When I was in elementary school, they were using those awful Dick and Jane books. See, Dick, run, run, run. How boring is that? Hate it. And so what Mother did, Mother taught me to read with phonics. And she just started having me sound out my words. But there's other kids where phonics will mess them up. There's some kids where they're going to be a whole word learner. Let them learn with the whole words. And there are cool things you can do with origami, which is pure pattern thinking. Now, when you ask me about a church steeple, I see specific ones. Ones around town where I live, childhood ones. It's specific. My concept of steeples is made out of specific examples. Now, if I have 20 different steeples that I've seen, I can sort them into cathedral type, New England type, chapels, warehouse type without a steeple. You see, I can start putting them in categories. But when I asked the astrophysics professor, no images. He just saw patterns of people singing and praying. I go, wow, that's beyond trippy. Now, let's look at something like the iPhone. Steve Jobs was a visual thinker. He designed the interface, made it simple. He was an artist. Steve Jobs was not a programmer. Engineers had to make the inside of the phone work. This is where you've got to have both different kinds of minds. Now that Steve is gone, they're trying to make the phones too complicated, and my phone loses messages all the time. I've talked to a whole bunch of other people. Theirs is doing the same thing. You know, sometimes simpler is better, but you need to have both kinds of minds. Now I get asked, how do you determine what kind of mind a person has? Well, in 3rd grade, the little artists will be making pictures. The little mathematicians will like math. But you gotta move them ahead in math. Oh, in fact, Stephen Hawking, in that article, I'm now seeing my vest up in the hotel room, because that's where the article is. He was discussing how physics and math was so easy in college, he didn't even have to study. You know, he was a pure math mind. Okay, we can get so over-specialized. I went to a crop science meeting 2 years ago. Really interesting, and I did this talk, and we got to talking about soil health. I'm learning like this much baby crop science. And what I'm learning is we need to be getting the cattle and the crops back together again, and putting cattle in as a rotation. Learning a lot more about that, because we get people asking about ethics of meat and all of that. Well, that would solve a huge amount of environmental problems if it's done correctly. But a top researcher at the plant science meeting told me they could get these super smart graduate students, but they got no creativity. This is what, what you want to do is avoid super narrow college majors. And when I looked at the SpaceX job board, that was a real good example of how they wanted the electrical engineering and the physics and the computer science and mechanical all mixed together. where it's not so specialized. Let's combine philosophy and history with business and writing classes. I want to make you employable. Putting computer science and engineering together. I did animal behavior, industrial design, neuroscience, and psychology. That was my background. And my psychology, I studied optical illusions. That helped me in my work with cattle. Because when I first started working with the cattle, I got down in the chute to see what they were seeing. That goes over at the plant today. We made sure no cattle were in the chute. And I got down in the chute, and I saw that they could see motion through some cracks in the door. They thought they covered it up, but the thing they covered it up with, it had ripped. You know, you've got to get down in there. Now, when we first went in there, they wanted to change the layout of the chute, which is reinforced concrete and hard to change. I go, no, that's not the problem. Let's just look at the little things they see moving. Little things. It's amazing how that can fix things. Okay, Isaac Asimov said a degree is the first step down a ruinous highway. You don't want to waste it, so you go into doctoral research and end up a thoroughgoing ignoramus. Everything in the world, except for one little subdivisional sliver of nothing.